My dear sisters and brothers in Jesus Christ, when I read this gospel passage preparing for today, what struck me very much is in Luke's gospel, it says that Jesus was on his way, maybe passing through a village. So Luke does not know the name of the village, which we would come to know much, much later in John's gospel, that it's Bethany. And as he was passing by, a woman called him, so Luke doesn't even know her name. And that woman, as we know in the gospel, would then be called Martha. What's so amazing is that I like to picture this like Jesus, tired, walking through a village and going through, and then this woman says, "Come here, come here." And when he enters, she says, "Lord, you must be tired." She knows who he is because all through the text she calls him Lord. So she must have been someone who heard him, heard about him. And the very fact that he responded must have given her extra joy that he has responded to come to the house. And then Martha begins to get concerned herself of looking after him. You know, sometimes you always look at Martha and Mary, and Martha's like the one, the bad picture. But here is Martha, who actually is the one who is all the time reacting. Some of you, my sisters and brothers, if you have read the Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Effective People, one of the things he says, one of the first 3, is the circle of influence and the circle of concern. And the circle of influence are things that are there, that happen, which we got no control at all. And the circle of concern is what I can do. Now the circle of influence has people who are reactive, constantly reacting. And people from the circle of concern are proactive. And here you can see 2 women in this house. One is reactive and one is proactive. And so you can see that when she enters there, people who are reactive all the time, circle of influence, are always people who are agitated, angry, I want to do this, I want to do that, and so on. They want to change the world as fast as possible. And you can see that with Martha. Because there's so many things happening, I don't want to miss out on what Jesus is talking. So Martha's sitting there, Mary's sitting there, why can't I also listen? So like, for example, she's quite practical. If both of us did something, both of us can sit and listen. So you see, Martha is one of those reactive. And so, of course, she complains to Jesus that my sister is doing absolutely nothing. And then Jesus, of course, says, Mary has chosen the better part. And what is that better part, my distant brothers? There's a beautiful painting which I used to use for the seminary studies on to paint is to pray. It's a beautiful painting of Martha and Mary, where Martha is got eyes of like a dagger against Mary. She's listening with one ear to what Jesus is saying, and the artist is very down to earth. There are eggs which are there. There's a dog waiting for attention, and she's cutting something there, and with one ear she's listening to Jesus. So she's so distracted. And what is the better way? The better way is Mary, who Jesus says has chosen the better way. Now, why would it be the better way? As I said in the beginning of the Mass, we make Jesus the center of our lives. I don't know about you, my sisters and brothers, but one of the most irritating things is when we are called to somebody's house, and we're called, say, for a lunch or a dinner. The lady of the house is all the time running in and out, in and out, in and out from the front room or the hall into the kitchen and coming back. And this. I mean, you knew I was coming, or you knew your guest was coming, so couldn't you do something and prepare? Like they say in Master Chef, they prepare. There's a French word that they use to prepare things before the serving starts. In the same way, of course, in this case, as I said, Martha was not aware. As Jesus was passing, she called him in. So that's fair enough, it's understandable. But what about other people that constantly are acting and reacting all the time? If you have a guest in your house, what would you expect that guest to listen to, that guest, to give attention to that guest? And this is what Mary has done. She gives attention to Jesus, and she's chosen the better way. She's chosen the better way to listen. If you heard yesterday's reading, there was a lawyer, just the reading before this. There was a lawyer, and this lawyer has come not to listen to Jesus. The very first line Luke writes there was a lawyer, and to disconcert Jesus, to upset the balance, disconcert is to shake him up a bit, to disconcert Jesus. And he began to ask, Master, which is the greatest law to keep? And Jesus can see through his hypocrisy, his over superior ego to show off how much he knows. And Jesus quotes from book of Deuteronomy and Leviticus, and the man is very happy. After all, a lawyer, he knows the law. And he says, Master, you're right. And then to put him in place, Jesus says, but you must love your neighbor. And then to show off, he asks, who is my neighbor? He doesn't want to say, I made a mistake. Who is my neighbor? So Jesus begins with a story which you heard yesterday. But the crux of it was this man, with so much of head knowledge, did not want to hear what Jesus said. My dear sisters and brothers, that would be the same with us. When we hear the reading, like for example, when brother was reading the reading, I said, how many people say, oh, I know the story, and I know what's the end, and I know Martha is going to say this, and I know Mary is going to say this. But are you really listening? Because if you're really listening, there will be something new that God would be talking to you. So what was Jesus telling Mary? I often wonder, there are certain blanks in the Bible. Like, what did Jesus write in the sand when he spoke to Mary of Magdala? What was it that triggered it off to make her say, I've sinned? So what was Jesus talking to Mary about? And that Martha was trying to listen. Was he talking about the good news? John 3:16, God so loved the world that he sent his only son. Or was he talking about the Beatitudes, because he's finished that in a few chapters before that? Or was he talking about the great 7 I ams? I am the resurrection, I am this. And I begin to think that maybe he was talking about this, the great I ams. I am the good shepherd, I am the door, I am that. Because when Lazarus dies, and if you read John chapter 11, when Lazarus dies, Martha, proactive, runs out and says, if you were here, complaining, same pattern follows. If you were here, my brother would not die. And then Jesus says, I am the resurrection. And she knows. She has heard before. Yes, I know you are the Messiah, and that with you nothing is impossible. So she did listen. She did listen to what was happening to Jesus. My dear sisters and brothers in Jesus Christ, we have such a lot of distractions in our own lives. When the rosary is being said, as I began talking in the beginning of the Mass, your left brain gets bogged down by repetitive work. So when you are anxious next time, take a blank paper and just draw straight lines. And your left brain will be saying, what is he doing? What is this man doing, just drawing nonsense straight lines? And your right brain is free to think, and creative ideas become more tangible. The same when you say, Hail Mary, Holy Mary, Hail Mary, Holy Mary, your brain in the left brain says, okay, I heard it once. Second time, 5 times, 9 times, 150 times. And that's when your brain gets distracted and ideas and come out. The best ideas come when you're saying a rosary. Isn't that true? The best recipes you want to prepare come out when you're saying a rosary, because your left brain is bogged down and your right brain is free to think about various things. And that is why Pope Francis, Pope John Paul II, written meditations for rosary, where you meditate on each mystery as you pray the rosary. My dear sisters and brothers in Jesus Christ, I like what one scripture scholar said about Martha. Martha was not preparing something good for the Lord. She was downright sinning in front of the Lord by not listening to him. She had her priorities wrong, and for that reason, she would be anxious. When are we anxious? We're anxious when things are not going too well. And that is why I like to end with what St. Paul says. Do not be anxious about anything, but in everything, by prayer and supplication and thanksgiving, let your request be made to God. Philippians 4:6.